Hello, good evening, and welcome. I'm Simon Bestwick.
And I'm Gemma Files, and this, of course, is No Darkness
Darkness.
But Ours. So,
How old are we
uh,
again? 12,
it's
We'll
a
never
new
know.
year.
It is. It is. God help us. Another
Uh,
year of this bullshit. So, we want to thank, first of all, Amelia Gardiner at Strike Media for giving us a screener of this movie, which is Thordur Palsson's The Damned. Just a brand new film out back end of last year, starring Odessa Young, Joe Cole, Lewis Gribben, and
Laurie
various others.
McCann for like 16 minutes.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
and Sharon Finneran, who's
yeah.
always excellent. Set at Iceland in 19th century, it looks like, and this is at a fishing station which has been sort of pretty much frozen in for the winter. It's being run by a young woman, Eva, who's played by Odessa Young, and she's the widow of the guy who initially founded and ran the station. She's there with like the crew of fishermen, and things are not going well. They have
No,
not been catching anything. And this is, there are these sheds with these huge nets where the fish are being hung up to dry. And the capacity is there for thousands and thousands of fish, and there is bugger all there, and they are kind of nibbling on the stuff they were using for bait at this point. Um, and in the middle of all this, a ship runs aground at the mouth of the bay, and there are people drowning, and they are faced with the prospect of, well, what do we do? And we can barely even feed ourselves. We cannot do anything to survive to help these people. But they do, when a barrel of salt pork washes ashore, they realise it might be worth going out to the wreck before the tide turns and washes it away to see what else they can salvage. And of
that's
course,
right.
the survivors trying to get on board, one of whom gets axed in the head, trying to, because he's about to tip the boat over. And then stuff starts to happen. There are bad things start to happen, and is this, sort of like
Yeah, this is very much framed as I think a mixture of two types of stories.
yeah,
The first is a kind of cold equations kind of story
yeah,
where you are, it's very Michelle Paver, very dark matter. It's like you are, in order to make a certain amount of money and to survive, you have to go out into a place where you shouldn't really be,
yeah,
and stay there for as long as you can while tipping the odds in your favor. Things that are against you are weather, cold, sickness, um, basically anything that I was watching In the Heart of the Sea the other day. And there's this moment where a ship is just completely demolished by a whale. And once again, it's brought back to you. It was based on the whale ship Essex,
yeah.
um, which
Kind of
got sunk
foundation for the
by.
movie Dick, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And that moment where you're like, here we are, and everything's great, and you're oh, holy shit,
Yeah,
it's all gone. And once again, you're confronted by how ridiculously huge everything is in nature, and how ridiculously small human beings are, and how we're always inserting ourselves into places and situations which are not great for us. Um, but the second story is it's a story about folklore. It's a story about the stories that we tell ourselves to explain why we have to do the things that we feel that we need to do. This is, where religion and folklore intersect. This is where morality and folklore intersect. And the folklore in this particular instance is the idea of the Draugr,
yeah,
specifically in its, I think, probably most ancient form, which is something that has been drowned, a drowned man who comes back to wreak vengeance on
yeah.
the people that it considers
There was a
are
line.
responsible.
There's a bit of verse that one of them's picked up along the way, and it's something like it steals for love of stealing, and it hurts for love of pain.
Mm-hmm.
That whole idea, the dead have come back, but they're not as we knew them. They are something that only wants to do us harm.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. And that
because
it's like a body with no soul. It's like literally it's very palpable. It's very it's very drippy and cold, and it grabs you and it pulls you.
Yeah.
And it gets inside your head. And
this other thing, of course, is that you were mentioning religion before me. Of course, these are the Draga, also referred to as the Drago or the Drogo, at various times. I'm not quite sure if anyone quite decided on a uniform pronunciation. But that's something that comes from this kind of pre-Christian Scandinavian folklore. But at the same time, these are all people who have been very much raised in a Christian tradition, and there is that conflict here, because the Christian thing to do when you see people in distress is to rescue them.
Yes.
But the necessities of survival are, you can't do that. You actually have to leave them to die. Of course, if you really want to interpret things in a strictly Christian way, you're supposed to care more about the spirit than about the body, and so you should. Kind of a pretty central tenet of Christianity is you've got to be willing to suffer physical privation or even death for the sake of doing the right thing. So there's this sense of a very, very harsh and stark morality that has that you kind of have to violate if you want to live.
Yes. And also, and so when there's at least one guy who is very religious, and there is a real conflict between him and Helga, the woman who's like the cook, the only other woman on the station. And Helga believes in she believes in the old ways. And there's this real feeling that when he starts railing against paganism, that what he's railing against is the Viking in himself, the Viking that knows, no, man, there's only so much food, there's only so much water, there's only so much stuff. It's like, we are not meant to be here, and if we want to stay alive while we're here, there's only so many things that we can do. They commit that act. There's there's a sin of omission, I suppose, if you want to look at it from a Christian point of view, where they don't do anything and they just leave the people on the boat to drown. Then there's the sin of commission, when they row out to actually their boat out to the ship to kind of grab any edible stuff. To steal stuff from it.
But there were still sailors alive clinging to the rocks, and they are literally. But again, even that's kind of a survival thing, because it's like they'll swamp the boat, they'll pull the boat over, and then we all die. But that's still one of them. They're fending them off with poles, and then one of them actually tries to come on board and gets an axe buried in his hair. And you've actually killed. Before you were just killing people by not doing something. Now you've actually killed someone.
And it breaks down to that thing of is it easier to kill people when you can't see them, when you can't look in their face? And for everything that, that cascade of bad decisions, right? Every bad decision is for a good reason. But it seems like everything you get, you lose something. You do not get your boat swamped, but Rory McCann goes off the other side.
Spoiler alert, as you say,
sorry.
You've got about 16 minutes of Rory McCann, aka the Hound from Game of Thrones.
Exactly.
Thanks to the name. So don't get, as with Game of Thrones, this is a character you don't want to get too attached to.
He's presented to you as a symbol of strength. He's the biggest guy. He's the, he knows the most. He's the person that everybody relies on. And what do you think is going to happen to that person in this kind of story?
Again, a lot of this goes back to our very first podcast and talking about all the white spaces and that kind of polar horror, that survival horror, where all the all the accoutrements, all this, everything, all the trappings are kind of stripped away, and it becomes about their survival. But there's also this thing, like a lot of really good sort of horror films, and this is very much one of these films which relies on atmosphere and build and suggestion, because you've got this glorious kind of landscape, this stunning but very bleak mountainous wintry landscape and this Arctic Sea beside you. But so much of it is, how much of this is actually some kind of supernatural thing, and how much is entirely these people? Because I think Helga says at one point that Draugr delights in, it wants to turn us against one another.
Yes.
And again, there's a lot that comes out of, again, people's own bad decisions, people's own how people process or don't process.
Exactly. And then they look for blame.
Yeah.
People don't usually start off blaming themselves.
No.
They usually. Yeah. So, Ava's in a tight spot, obviously, because she is rapidly, she kind of has to act like everybody's. She has to act like her husband. She has to act like everybody's mom, like everybody's sister. She has to, and she's beautiful. She kind of looks like a Victorian corpse. But she doesn't want people to be thinking of her sexually, obviously.
Although there is a sort of tentative romance developing between her and Daniel, Joe Cole's character.
Yes, that's right. There's this real feeling that if things hadn't gone the way they went with Magnus, who I think was Daniel's friend as well as his employer, that she might have ended up marrying him. But and so this thing of you can't allow yourself vulnerability. You can't allow yourself to kind of fold into the nearest guy, and let them take over, because you have to be the person who can,
She has authority, but at the same time, it's it's like that line in Miller's Crossing: you run this town because people think you run it. As soon as they stop thinking it, you stop running it.
Yeah, exactly.
Ultimately, if that does change, she's like one quite small, physically small woman against a bunch of guys who are all built like, most of them are built like brick walls.
Yeah,
essentially. So there is that level of vulnerability as well.
Yes. So when she sort of embraces the idea of the Draugr, it's almost like she's taking on the mantle of being like a shamaness, like a Viking priestess, like a Volva. It's like I accept this, and therefore, you can follow me as we try to get rid of this thing.
Yeah. So they're dealing with this very harsh winters, very harsh environment, and then there's this other presence which is just, and it doesn't really have to do that much.
No.
They get a new haul of fish in. It just takes them.
Yep.
And they're right back where they started.
And worse, because they've celebrated. So they got super drunk and then woke up the next morning and it's like all the fish is gone.
Yeah, I think we're dancing a little bit here, because there is a really fantastic twist in this film, and I don't think either of it. It took me completely by surprise. I'm sure it did the same for you. And it's not something you want to.
No, exactly. We can flirt with it, but I definitely don't want to pop that bubble.
No, it's. I mean.
It is, so much of it is about the shadow on the cave wall. So much of it is about what's outside the circle of the firelight.
Because you don't really get to see this thing properly.
Yeah.
Not the very end of the film. Very climax of it, and so you're really seeing what it's doing, and the impact it's having, and the effect it's having, and how it's slowly breaking everyone down in their different ways. So it's a little bit like Session 9 in that respect, although they're not quite going to the same extremes of self-destruction here. There is actually some physical presence out there.
Yeah, but self-destruction does come into it a bit, because as people start getting sick, as people start getting fevered, as people start to worry about their own minds, about the things that they might do. There's a moment where something happens and you're like, was that intentional? Did that person do that intentionally, or was that just an accident? And it could be either way. Because when you're on an island full of sheer cliffs, when you're and sometimes the fog comes down and you can't see anything, it's like too much black versus too much white. What is that shape in the mist?
Yeah, it's a very, very, I mean, it's just a beautifully done film. The performances all across the board are absolutely spot on. Cinematography, the whole look of the film, this gorgeous but utterly forbidding kind of landscape. And as I say, it starts at this quite slow pace, and it slowly builds, and it turns the screw and tightens its grip. And yeah, I mean, I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a terrific movie.
Me as well. Yeah, me as well. It's very much the kind of thing that I like.
Yeah, I mean, I think the short version is really, if you like supernatural, if you like slow burning supernatural horror, if you like horror set in wintry landscapes, if you like that element of survival horror, period
psychological horror as well,
very much so.
Yeah.
Then I think that then The Damned is definitely a film that you are gonna want to watch.
Yes.
I think it's an absolute cracker.
But go into it as unspoiled as you can.
Yeah.
I believe it just came out in the UK, and it's in limited release here in Toronto. So
if you get the chance, go see this film on the big screen, because those
hell yeah,
those icy landscapes are just going to look magnificent. I had to watch mine on my. I had to watch it on my laptop, and that was terrific. But watching it on the big screen, oh man, that's gonna be a treat. So
the sound design is really beautiful and horrifying.
Yeah. And really, that's probably as much as we can say without spoiling the film, I think, for people.
I think so. Yes. Yeah.
Who are going to see it. So in summation, go and see The Damned. It's an absolute cracker of a movie. 2 thumbs up from me.
Yeah. Two seeping rotten thumbs up from me as well.
And as a big thank you again to Amelia at Strike Media, who let us have an advance screener of this. We're really
very nice.
Made for a very pleasant afternoon's viewing. That definitely did.
Yes. Pleasant. Yes. Yes.
So we will be back very soon to lower the tone of the conversation once again. But until then, I have been Simon Bestwick.
I remain Gemma Files, and this is as always, no darkness.
No darkness.
But ours.